probably talked to most of you since signing on this operational about 4 years ago. Welcome to what I would cautiously call, for most of us, the first hint of spring this week. And welcome back to many of you who've attended earlier webinars in my series of what we hope are helpful webinars. We are recording this session today. You're lucky. It's only audio and what you see up here on the monitor. I still don't have a webcam. This presentation will be posted on the internet. You can link to it from our community pages. You see the address here, community.schoollogic.com. As usual, to preserve the audio quality, we run with all of you fine folks muted. Keep track of your questions as we go along. Email them to our support desk when you have the opportunity, just like any other question. We'll be happy to answer them, and frankly, most of them get assigned to me anyway, which is a beautiful thing. For our demonstrations today, we are running the latest, greatest version of SchoolLogic 4.1.6 in front of a database of 2.2.363. You'll see me working today in Internet Explorer 11, and I just want to throw in a quick note about IE 11. First of all, SchoolLogic, TeacherLogic, HomeLogic should work in any of the modern browsers, Safari, Firefox, Chrome, IE. But we have had some reports about abnormalities in IE 11, including on my own computer. I've seen some bogusness in regards to reports and our report manager, and I've heard that the date picker, you know, in several places in SchoolLogic where we give you the little blue and red calendar to pick from, I've heard that that doesn't always work right in SchoolLogic when it's run in IE 11. So, you know, you may have to futz with, that's a technical term, this thing called compatibility view settings. For instance, if you mouse over your menus in SchoolLogic and they don't drop down, that's a sign it's time to engage compatibility view settings. Let me show you what I'm talking about here in IE 11. If I go to the favorites, rather the tools menu, if I go to tools and I choose compatibility view settings, notice that this is blank. If this was the first time I would ever come in here, the name of my web server, which is localhost, or the website, would have jumped into here. But because I've been here before, you know, it jumps in here, you add lights up, you click it, and it comes down and is in here. So now IE has been told, hey, any web activity that comes off of this web server, deal with it in compatibility view. Now, there's a couple things that makes me unhappy about this. First of all, that I have to do it at all. And then secondly, in order to get IE to remember it, like my version is doing here, you have to first go to Tools, go to Internet Options, and uncheck Delete Browsing History on Exit. That's underneath Browsing History. Okay? I'm a little unhappy you have to do that because I would have run, in fact, I was running with this turned on. That was kind of my SOP. I'm kind of unhappy that I have to do that. Now, somebody in development in our team did mention they're working on a small set of instructions that addresses this issue at the IIS level, which would be really cool. But it's cool because you wouldn't have to have each of your operators on every machine. You know, you take a big district like Golden Hills or somebody, and they got a lot of operators, a lot of different computers. That's kind of a hassle to have all of them make those two adjustments I just showed you. It'd be a lot easier if you could just make run one script in IIS, and boom, it happens for you. So when development gets that set of instructions to me for IIS, I will post it on the website, community.schoollogic.com. If I had my druthers, I would just still be running IE 9. And this is one of several digressions that you'll probably hear from me today, but I thought I should mention that because we have had some issues with IE 11. But that's not really why you folks stopped by today, and I do appreciate each and every one of you that stopped by. The discipline incidents is what we want to talk about, and we are going to talk about these 5 parts of it. We are going to spend an awful lot of time on the actual discipline form. Amazingly enough, that's where you enter the discipline incidents. We're going to spend more time than you probably expected behind the scenes because there is a ton of setup involved in this. There are no fewer than 29 different lookup tables that have some influence on discipline incidents. No, I will not show all 29 of them to you. We will talk a fair amount about reports because you get all this discipline information in there, and I will literally show you on this monitor how you can arrive at data-driven decisions, because I'll show you how you can get the data up in reports. We'll show you what this looks like from the SchoolLogic point of view and what the parents see in SchoolLogic. Parents don't see a ton. The teachers can actually work on discipline incidents right in SchoolLogic. Most of our time, as I mentioned a minute ago, will be spent on the discipline form and on the reports. We access the discipline by going to the discipline events menu and then choosing, well, let me start with a little history here. This screenshot shows the maximum number of possibilities, and it shows a configuration that we don't recommend. Notice that in this screenshot, I have two choices. I have discipline and suspensions, and I have discipline incident. Okay, what's the story here? The top one, discipline and suspensions, is SchoolLogic's original discipline tracker. Then, a couple years back, we introduced discipline incident. We recommend you choose one or the other. We recommend that you choose the newer one, discipline incident. And why? Well, why would I say that? Because that's the one that developers continue to improve. This other part, it's stagnant. You know, we're not working on this guy anymore. Once you make your choice, we recommend that you use security settings to make the other one disappear from the menu, like you see here, okay? Security settings, I went in there and I hid discipline and suspensions. So now my operators only get one choice, discipline incident. This is the modern choice. You can track a far greater amount of details per incident. You can have multiple perpetrators, multiple victims, multiple witnesses, multiple infractions, and multiple punishments, all out of this. Like many things in life, there is a great deal of setup work to do up front. But the payoff is you can track and store an awful lot more details, and you can do a ton of reports. Like I said, this is the method that developers continue to work on. So this is the method we recommend, and I'll be showing you this today. I might also mention that some states and provinces, if they ask for disciplined information, the amount of it they ask for and the pieces they ask for may necessitate that you use discipline incident as opposed to the previous version of discipline and suspensions. Now, in a couple of minutes, we're going to do what you expect me to do, which is go in and look at the actual screens that operator enters discipline on. And I tell you, we won't be there for 10 seconds, and you'll be saying to yourself, oh, I see how this whole form is really built around setup information. So the front end of this little discussion, we're going to talk about setup information, and we're going to talk about setup tasks. Now, the tasks mostly revolve around security. I'm going to suggest to you that you may want to have fewer operators rather than more given access to creating the incidents. On the other hand, some schools do have their teachers using SchoolLogic creating discipline incidents. So it's all up to you. You have to decide about menu access to discipline. You have to decide, am I going to have read access? Am I going to have edit access? And just a note, when you go into group security, there is a separate area for offense code security. A lot of operators kind of miss that. Offense code security is the ability to create the new codes and to see the new codes, security offense codes. As for the setup information, the single biggest thing I want you to remember from today is this. If you have not yet set up discipline in SchoolLogic, or SERS for that matter, you need to be very logical about it, very thoughtful about it. Really look at the big picture. I would suggest, broadly, that fewer offenses, fewer outcomes, fewer factors are easier to keep track of and to use on a daily basis. Fewer rather than more. On the other hand, the more pieces of information you enter about an incident, the more complete your picture will be, and over time, the more interesting ways you can slice it, dice it, and report on it. For instance, the records you'll see me working with today track a range of times that incidents occur. So each incident obviously has a starting time that you get to enter in the record. The data that you'll see me using today, which is actually data from one of our actual schools, they created a window. They took an educational day and they broke it up into about 2-hour segments. And so when they create a discipline incident, they assign it to one of these segments of time. Now, if you only had 6 records, that's probably not a really big deal. But you have the potential with our software to amass 1 or 2 semesters of data. And as an aside, you can also go back and look at incidents that occurred in other years. So you're not limited to this year. But even 2 semesters of data, can I call that big data? Well, it allows you to potentially do the same sorts of things that the big data guys do. You can do all sorts of analysis and studies of incident by time, by location, and that can allow you to make what the marketing people call data-driven decisions. If you end up, for instance, with a ton of discipline incidents in the last 15 to 30 minutes before school starts, couldn't you use that data to help you decide where and when your staff should be roaming the halls? Now, as for this set of information, as I mentioned, there are no fewer than 29 lookup tables that play into discipline. I would suggest it is best to have those 29 tables be board or district owned. And I would suggest you plan the heck out of them. Maybe a committee made up of key users from each building plans these lookup values, plans how the incidents will be recorded, edited, reported on. Have an idea where you want to go with this data so that you know what to track, how to enter it, to drive those results that you desire. Now, let's go look at what this list of lookup values that I keep talking about. I said there's 29. I'm not going to talk about each and every one of the 29, but, well, here's the first group. And on this particular tab, what's interesting? Well, discipline reasons. This is huge. This is the list of what specifically your student did to get into trouble in the first place. Employment type. This is a list of types of employment that might be needed because our new package, this new disciplines and incident thing, lets you have non-students involved in your incident. Myself, I conceive of this as maybe being district employees versus non-district employees. You obviously get to decide for yourself. I don't know how important it would be for you to track an adult witness or adult victim and say, well, this is a contractor versus this is a truck driver. If that's important to you, great. On the other hand, I think that if you know whether the adult works for your district in some capacity or is a non-district employee, to me, that might be enough. But you guys get to decide. Environmental factors, this is kind of cool. This could potentially be a list of environmental factors that might play a part in the incident, like an assembly, a sporting event, group work, seat work. This could be kind of interesting, and of course, you guys get to define what it is in your world. I'll try to remember to point this out as we go to the actual incidents, because there's a lot of variables here. It could be fun. Incident action, this is huge too. Incident action is the list of possible actions that your staff takes to deal with the incident. Conferences, suspensions, all those sorts of things. Incident type, generally a list of types of incidents, maybe, in other words, kind of a classification of incidents, gang-related, property-related, hate-related. You could use this for the severity ratings. A lot of pretty subjective things you could do here. Offender type, list of types of defenders. I don't know. This might be more detailed than you really care to have, frankly. Law enforcement ID. If certain, this is a list of possible values to indicate the result of a law enforcement involvement, or if not the result, at least the fact that law enforcement was involved. Actually, there are some states that require you to have this as part of your incident record. On the other hand, if certain agencies were maybe involved on your campus, just hypothetically speaking, you might be asked not to record their involvement. I don't know. Parental involvement, list the ways the parents can be involved in an incident. Maybe this is your appraisal of how the parent reacted to the whole thing. Did the parent help you? Did the parent hinder you? Possible functions. This is really interesting too. I like this one. Potentially a list of possible functions the incident may have had. You're saying, well, how does the incident have a function? Well, either by interviewing the kid or by your own observation, what was the kid out to gain by acting up? Peer attention? Are we trying to avoid a scheduled event? Are we trying to gain parental or adult attention? This is kind of interesting. I will make a point of showing this to you when we're out in the actual software, and we're going to get to the software pretty quick. My final little chart here of the 29 tables that you can potentially work with. Role is really important. What's a list of possible roles that people might have had in an incident? And most folks, most of the time, start out at least with these three: offender, victim, witness. And these, those are the visible things the operators see behind the scenes, code 1, code 2, code 3. Relationship to schools. Again, you can have non-students be in your incidents. So you may need a way to relate that person back to the school. I mean, why is this guy on your campus in the first place? Is he a teacher? Is he a parent? Is he a vendor like me? I've on school campuses. Time description. This could be a list of times a day, before class, lunch. This can help you make more sense of the individual time, and I will show you this. This goes back to what I spoke about earlier, where my school divided their day into time blocks. That's kind of where we're going with this. Victim type, list the possible types of victim. For instance, was it a student? Was it a student with an IEP? Was the parent a victim? You're saying to yourself, well, why do I care if it's a student with an IEP? Because you could go back and do a report, and you could track, well, are students that have IEPs more likely to be victimized in discipline incidents? It just helps you know what's going on and break it down and go back and look at it later. So those of you that, particularly that are in the audience that have a more technical bent, are saying to yourself, where is Al expecting me to store all this stuff? Well, let's go to SchoolLogic, because in SchoolLogic I will show you that most of this stuff gets stored in lookup tables, okay? And it's not really that difficult. I just need to log in over here, and let's log in this first time around as an administrator. So I'm going to be the district administrator for USA Canada Schools, and let's go look at incident actions. So where am I? Okay, I've gone to setup, and I've gone to look up tables, because I said that's where most of this stuff is going to get stored. And let's look at incident actions. Now, the first thing I'll point out to you, and I mentioned this very briefly earlier, but I'll point out to you that this is district owned. Now, this is a fairly long list, right, of incident actions. What are incident actions? These are the things that your staff does after the kid does something, okay? Now, even though this is a long list, I guarantee you this would be a longer list if it were building owned. Look here. I got detention, right? I've got lunch detention. If this were building owned, I would probably also have before school detention, AM recess detention, PM recess detention. Everybody would want their own codes. So looking at having some kind of committee that makes these district lists makes a ton of sense to me. But here's the thing. If PM recess detention versus AM recess detention is really important to you, hey, I'm not here to dissuade you from making a code for each. The reason you bought a computer in the first place was to hold all this data and to be able to do something with it. So if AM versus PM is important to you, hey, record it, track it, analyze it, do reports on it. I just want you to leave here today with a concept that you need to have a plan. You need to have a reason for everything you do here, because if you start doing this willy-nilly, I promise you this will spiral out of control. Let's go look at parental involvement. Parental involvement we looked at a second ago on our little slideshow. Let's go look at that here. Okay, parental involvement. I've got cared, didn't care, listened, didn't listen. Now, I told you, this is an actual edited database from one of our clients. We ran the data. We ran the data through our data mixer for the protection of all involved. We chose this database because this district makes extensive use of discipline incident and had most of this stuff already filled in. But this is obviously a field where Al made up his own data. Now, all of these lookup tables, which I showed you a little bit ago on those PowerPoint slides, they're all going to look like this, right? I'm going to probably be district-owned, and then I'm going to have individual items where the name is what the operator sees in SchoolLogic, and the code is stored behind the scenes in SQL, right? I truly urge you to decide which mandates you must satisfy when you make the discipline records. Decide what you and your staff want out of the discipline records, and then put serious thought into setting up these lookup tables. That's going to allow you to produce the records that meet your need. By the way, I said there's 29 lookup tables. That list I showed you on the PowerPoint slide, I actually took that from pages 4, 5, and 6 of our Discipline Incidents Owner's Manual. We have a 28-page PDF, not very long, a lot of pictures. I will take that 28-page PDF and I will put it up on our website, community.schoollogic.com. When I put the recording of this webinar up there, I'll also put that up there for you because that could be really helpful. And a final thought here on the lookup tables. If anything that I've said today so far about organizing planning makes good sense to you, but you've already got some of this done, there is a merge feature. And that merge feature, see it right down here on the far, far left of my screen? Okay. That merge feature is explained in the owner's manual. It allows you to enter some new values and then replace old values, even if they're already assigned to students, with the new values that you add. So, okay, let's go look at some incidents because that's really why you guys came today. We're going to log out. We don't want to be a district user anymore. We're going to become a school user. It's one of the few times that it's okay with me that the computer takes a second to do something because it lets me get a little water in here. So we are going to go to discipline events, and we are going to pick discipline incident. And we're going to look at my first friend here, Hank. Takes almost enough time to get another hit of water in there. Hank's records come up. Okay, this is the discipline incident series of tab cards. There's actually 4 tab cards. We're going to look at each and every one of the tab cards. I'm going to try not to bore you, but this is all important stuff, some of it more important than others. Incident date, incident time, pretty self-explanatory stuff there. Then we get the time description, and this is what I've been yapping about 2 or 3 different times today. This school has gone in and they've created roughly 2-hour bands from 7 to 9, from 8 to 10, from 10 to 11:59. They've created these bands. Now, I didn't interview them, but I suspect that the thought behind that is, when I go to report, the individual time that something happened may not be that important to me, but this overall concept of where it happened could be more important to me because it lets me make data-driven decisions about how am I going to staff my place. Again, if I found that I had a ton of stuff happening between 7 and 9 in the morning, wouldn't I somehow deploy my teachers and my staff differently to emphasize where they are that time of the day and put them, as an athletic coach would say, an athletic coach exists to put his players into position to make the plays. If you're talking about staffing at a school, you're putting your staff in position to make the plays. And what time of the day they are and where they are play into that hugely. So incident location. Where did the incident occur? Now, most people, most of the time, don't get quite so granular as to enter individual rooms. That seems a little over the top to me, but again, it's your data and you can do what you want. Here, they just said, okay, classroom, as opposed to cafeteria, bus. You know, I suspect bus gets a lot of use for this. Incident type is kind of up to you. This particular data has major, minor, and general. You can use this to make whatever kind of classification you want. Permanent versus private. This is pretty interesting, pretty important. Permanent means if I say yes to this, this incident is going to follow my friend Hank throughout his career. It will always be part of his record. If I say no to this, when the software does demographic rollover at the end of during the summer, when you do demographic rollover, you will erase this incident record. Private. Now, for starters, to get this far, I have had security access assigned to me that lets me at least read incidents. I could, of course, also have RMD. I could have read, I could have enter records, and I could have delete records. That is, by the way, what I really have. So to get this far, I have security clearance. Now, if I mark this no, it's a standard incident and everybody gets to see it that has access to this. If I say yes, keep an eye on the right-hand side of your monitor. Look at that. If I say yes, if I want to make this a private incident, now here's a list of all the folks in my staff table, and I can assign individual members either read, modify, or delete access. I think that's pretty cool. The developers also gave you a little more opportunity here to expand on incident location, time description. Unlike these guys, which obviously are drop-down menus where you set them up and look up values, here these are just free-form entry. You can type in whatever you want. Be a little careful when you start turning your operators loose doing that because you will end up with all sorts of data. Some of it will be valuable. Some of it will be a mishmash. Incident comments, one of the most important things I got going here. Incident comments is a free-form area where you are going to enter your description of the event. I didn't go and look in SQL. Obviously, there's some kind of character limit to this. The limit's really high because you can make a pretty long incident record. You can tell what happened and who said what. Up on the right-hand side of the screen, referral date. You know, often these incidents occur and it doesn't come to your attention right away, or maybe it happened on Friday or Saturday. Maybe something happened at the dance on Saturday. You don't learn about it until Monday. There you go, referral date. Referred by staff, referred by school. These are, you know, fed by your staff table and your school table out in SQL. Maybe this is an incident that happened at a different one of your schools. We happen to actually be part of Provost High School. And look, this was referred to us by Buffalo Tracks, which is another school within our district. It's also pretty good ice cream. Referred by staff, who busted the kid? Was there a cost involved? Did the kid do something to your facility and you're going to get him to make restitution? Referred by other, that could maybe be a police officer, could be a parent, could be somebody in the community. Post to home logic. First of all, incidents only come up to their parents. So if you are a parent that did not have a kid involved in the incident, you don't get to see the incident in the first place. Parents, as you'll see quite a bit later in my presentation, don't see a whole lot of information. They definitely don't see the victim's name. But you could still say, no, I don't want this to go to SchoolLogic at all, or you could say yes, and then the parents of those involved at least get to know something happened. Now, here are two of the most interesting ones on the tab: environmental factors and possible functions. Environmental factors, again, this could be anything that you dream up, but it could be something like what in the environment may have led to, contributed to, been part of the incident. I think one of the most interesting choices here is, in this particular data, again, you could make different ones, in this particular data, teasing from peers, either based on an interview with those involved or based on your own observations. Could this have been part of the environment that contributed to the incident? That's an interesting thing, and it makes for interesting things to track. Possible functions, I love this one. Again, either you interview the kid or you make your own observation and you go, okay, what was the end game here? Was he out to gain adult attention? Was he out to gain peer attention? Did he want to avoid group work? Whatever. And again, these are your observations. You could very well leave these blank. But if you wanted to fill them in, I think this is an interesting way. Intervention staff type. Unfortunately, if you've worked with kids and incidents for more than about 6 weeks, you've figured out that many times, but not always, people involved in an incident were involved in previous incidents. And you may want to track, well, what have we tried in the past? What's gone on already? Okay. In fact, one of the reports that we do, you have the opportunity when you report on today's incident, there's a little box that you can check that says print the other ones too. Some kids, it can take a lot of paper. But intervention staff type, what did we try in the past? Okay. We go on to person. And once we get on to person, most of this is pretty self-explanatory. Here's my two kids that are involved. Hank is the offender. Evelyn is the victim. These are, remember, we had roles. We talked about those. I don't know if you want to have other roles. You certainly could, but offender and victims come to mind. Those are the easy ones. Victim type, again, was Evelyn an IEP kid? Does that matter? Well, maybe not, but if you wanted to track, if you wanted to say, hey, do kids who have IEPs show up an abnormal number of times as victims? You can track things like that. Were they bullied? Okay. Offender type, I don't know how many different types of offenders you have. You have students and non-students. If you want to dream up other ones, that's a beautiful thing. Ethnicity, this is almost a little out of date on this form. In fact, it really is a little out of date on this form. This form expects that the school is going to have just one ethnicity per child, and it's going to be picked from a predetermined list. Most schools now will tie up multiple fields to report a student's ethnicity, because students now generally have multiple ethnicities if they choose. So that kind of makes ethnicity here a little bit out of place. Maybe I should mention that to development. Injury type, were there injuries involved? Was a kid treated here? Was a kid treated and released at a hospital? Did we offer assistance? Did we offer medical assistance? A lot of simple things there. Offenses. Okay, what did Hank do? Now, unlike almost every other part of SchoolLogic, it's not as simple as clicking here and this is how I add a new offense. Okay, because every place else in SchoolLogic where there's a little arrow like this, that means there's a drop-down list. Here, if I want to add a new offense, I come all the way out to the right and I click Add. That presents me with my list of offenses, and those of you who have been around the block, you know where this is coming from. It's coming from lookup tables. You created this list of offenses. So you pick one there from Add, it drops in here. You get to manually enter the weapon count. I don't teach in schools every day. I'm not in school buildings every day. But if this weapon, to me, it's bad enough that a kid could have one weapon. If you start entering multiples in here, you got a lot of trouble on your hands. Comments, you'll see a little bit later that students can have multiple offenses. Therefore, I could have a comment line for each of the offenses if I so choose. And that leads us to actions. What are actions? Actions are what the school district does after the kid commits the offense. Now, stay with me here because you got to click along with me. If I click on Hank, he's my person. As soon as I click on him, I get my offense. You'll see later, kids have multiples of these, potentially. Once I click on the offense, that opens up the opportunity to do an action. But there's no drop down here. I come all the way to the right, and I click Add, and there's my incident actions coming at me from lookup values. Now, once I have an action, it doesn't end here, because I have no fewer than 3 different charts that I could fill out. Now, potentially, you're not going to fill out all 3 for each action, but you could. We give you lots of choices here, lots of room. Okay, let's look at suspension. Who suspended the kid? When did we decide he was going to be suspended? When did the suspension start? When did the suspension end? Was there some kind of review involved? Notify staff is interesting. There are a couple of different places in discipline incidents where I can notify staff. And if I pick a staff member here, once I click Submit and I close out, the next time this person logs in, they will get a little message saying, go look at this. Now, I'm on suspension, right? Check this out. This is one of the reasons you bought a computer. I can go into suspension details, and I can say, yes, this is a suspension. No, it's not an in-school suspension. I can enter my dates. Okay? I'm going to suspend the kid from 12 March until 17 March. Well, let's suspend him going forward, right? 14 through 17. Do we have external counseling? Don't know. Suspension type, it's going to be out of school. That's a drop-down list. Oh, by the way, make the student absent during the suspension period. Why would I say no to that? Okay, I say yes to that. Computer says, hey, what's his reason? His reason is he was suspended. Okay, so now I've got one part of SchoolLogic talking to another part of SchoolLogic. Here I am in incidents, and I'm talking to the attendance portion. That's why you bought a computer. Okay, nice touch. I can have law enforcement details about any of my actions, and I can have parental involvement. We referred the kid to the dean. How did the parent react to that? What did the parent have to say? Okay, pretty cool. A lot of stuff there for you to potentially fill in. Let's go look at another one quick. Here's Mr. Ken's. Now, Mr. Ken's, I want to see his incident because I want to show you something new here. With regard to this incident, now I have one student, right? But you're going to see I can have multiple victims. So, okay, first of all, we see here that this has been marked private. And that means that only these people are going to have read access. Only these 2 people get read access to this. This incident involves things that are, sexual innuendo, sexual harassment. So maybe I don't want all of my staff having access to that. Okay? Now, when I go into persons, I see that Hank is my single offender, but look at this. I've got multiple victims. 2 student victims and a staff victim. Okay? I can, by the way, I can add a non-student at any time. If I select the non-student, select just means that they've been here before, and Lori Abbott's one of my staff members, okay? That's what she's about. But I can add a non-student at any time, and I can have this employment type. We talked about that a little earlier. What's my relationship to the school? Maybe I'm a parent, maybe I'm a staff member, maybe I'm a vendor. Okay, so these are injury type. This Lori got treated here, so it must have been relatively minor, but still there was an injury involved. So what are these offenses? Okay, well, I've got one student, but not only did I have multiple victims, I've got multiple offenses. Now let's see how this plays out. My first offense is something that this school calls amorous behavior. Okay, 2 students and 1 teacher. I've got abusive language because the kid was ticked once we brought him in on this, and then flagrant disrespect. The kid wasn't just ticked, he was pissed. And you guys all work in schools. I don't want to use bad language, but if you work in a school, you've probably heard this term. Okay, so I've got multiple people. I've got multiple offenses. Now check this out. For each offense, I can have potentially multiple actions. So here's my suspension. Here's when my suspension started. Here's where my suspension ended. Okay? For this abusive language, I have a different action or outcome. Some people will call that outcome. Was a parent conference. Okay? Let's click on parental involvement, and we find that when we phone the parent listed. The parent seemed genuinely disturbed that this incident occurred. Okay. Third offense. The third offense was this flagrant disregard, business disrespect. That resulted in a loss of privileges. You can come in here and you can enter the details about the privileges lost. So not just a one-to-one basis, but here, one-to-many. And then the final incident I want to show you is my new friend Evelyn. Evelyn was involved in a big fight. While we're waiting for this to come up, I'll tell you that Evelyn was in a fight. Now, the third example I want to show you is the interesting thing here is you're going to see multiple offenders. So let's get Evelyn's record up here for this big fight that she was involved in. She was involved in a, oh, look, one of the environmental factors was a substitute teacher. So the substitute teacher had this class on a field trip, and you know from your experience, substitute teachers sometimes people try to take advantage of them, right? So here's Evelyn. Evelyn got into a big fight with this other girl named Evelyn. In fact, this other girl named Evelyn was treated and released from the hospital. So that means the first Evelyn was probably wailing on this kid pretty good. Well, what happened? Well, my first friend Evelyn, we have charged her essentially with, oh, there was a weapon involved? Okay, so the first girl's got a knife, hence my weapon count of 1. We're also going to talk about aggravated assault. But this girl wasn't exactly blameless, so she's on the hook for aggravated battery. So I've got multiple people, multiple offenses. Let's go look at the actions. So that weapon thing, we didn't screw around. We called the cops. Law enforcement record, we find out that a state law enforcement official was involved. We found out in the end the kid was fined for having the weapon. And, oh, by the way, my law enforcement agent's name was Danny Reagan. Weapon detected. Hey, I have a 5-inch blade. This is a serious knife. This kid should be suspended. Okay? Aggravated assault. Well, what happened with that? We called the parent. You know what when we called the parent? The parent didn't really care, leading us to believe that Evelyn's problems began at home. What about my other girl? We called her parents, and her parents said, we're shocked. Okay. Now, you bought a computer to store all this stuff, right? Check this out. This is really cool. So we are currently in Evelyn's record. And Evelyn Timo, she's my instigator. But the other girl wasn't exactly blameless, we decided. So let's go look at her record. Here's my other girl, Evelyn Boynton. This is the same incident. I did not have to enter this twice, okay? As soon as the second person involved is a student, you only have to enter the record once. And SchoolLogic is smart enough to propagate the record to the area for both kids, okay? Now, that's not exactly designing a space shuttle, I'll grant you that, but it's still an outstanding use of the computing power of it. You don't have to enter the record twice. You enter the record once, it gets shipped off to both locations, okay? Works pretty well. I got about 15 minutes to get you guys out of here. So these incidents have been entered. Now what happens next? Reports. We can do reports. Broadly speaking, you can do 2 types of reports. You can do reports on multiple students, or you can do reports on a single kid. When you do a report on multiple students, you could run the whole school if you wanted. You could do the entire district if you wanted. You could look at specific acts. So you could run a report that says, show me all of my weapon-involved incidents over a given date range. Show me all of my disrespect incidents over a given date range. Okay? And now you're starting to get at the data that allows you to make data-driven decisions. Do you see trends that you believe you can head off? Is there a time or a location that's troublesome and you need to do something about that? Are there bad actors coming in from the outside, either from another school within your district or perhaps from outside your district? You can do these reports on broad numbers of kids, broad numbers of incidents over as long or as short a time period as you want, and you're making these big data observations. You can do student-based reports. You could concentrate on what specific kids have been up to, a group of kids or maybe an individual kid, because, you know, some of these are going to end up being in court, some of the kids, right? And so you would like to have a report of what happened on your school on paper that can become part of the court record. Now, let's kind of look at these. First of all, if I go to discipline events, there's a third kind of report. This incident report is the one where you do lots of students, or you could just do one student. Student incident report, it's more student-based. Generally, you do one group or a small group of kids. Look at this. I didn't even mention this. Incident letter report. Now, this kind of generally takes a minute or two to load. Well, not literally a minute, but this takes a little while to load. Look at my buddy Hank. All of these reports will always give you a date range, either around the action, that's what you did, around the incident, that's what the kid did, or when the kid was referred. Okay, so, you know, if you want to go back and say, let's look at all the referrals for the month of January, you would unengage all referral dates and you'd enter the month of January. I just care about incident date range because I only want you to see, remember, this is real data, so I don't want you to see all the real incidents. I just want you to see the ones that Al made up. So this is what an incident letter looks like. The concept here is immediately after the incident occurs or at the end of the week or whatever, this letter would go home to the parent. You could put it in a window envelope if you wanted to. So it's the kind of the bare bones stuff about, you know, what happened, what was the kid charged with, what were my incident comments, you know, Hank threatened another student's family, okay, what happened, two things happened, we had a parent conference, we got referred to the dean, okay. Here's my other incident. Remember that this particular student named Hank was involved in 2 incidents within that time frame, so I got 2 pieces of paper, okay. I can do this thing called, let's look at the incident report. Now, when I go to the incident report, notice there's no choice to pick my students here. Why? Because I'm going to get all the kids that are involved. So if you only want some kids, you have to go use the other one. If you only want some kids, go to the student incident report, and then you can pick a grade level, a homeroom, an individual student, a user-defined group of students. However you can group students, they'll come up here. Incident report is designed to do the bigger, broader thing, okay? I'm going to get all the kids in my building, right? Because I'm a building person. If I run this as a district person, I will get all the kids in the district, okay? So again, we're going to start with the 1st of March. Pretty basic stuff here. I'm going to pick within a date range. Do I want all of my offense codes or only some of them? You know, if I was trying to do a report on, well, what about this? Everybody wants to talk about people bringing electronic devices, right? So I could do a report that only shows my violations of my electronic device rule, okay? Watch out for those kids who are bringing in the answers on their smartphones. Action codes. Maybe I want to do a report that says how many were involved in detention. Now, I will tell you up front that this part of our software does not do the mathematical totals. So if you're looking for how many kids were involved in detention, make yourself a user-defined report, because in user-defined reports, I can do counting. This is an important one. Do I want to display my victim's name on the incident report or not? You got to think about who's going to read the report. If this is a bigger report that you're going to send home to parents, maybe you don't want the parents to see the victims' names. If you're going to have it only within your school district, only within your office, maybe you do go ahead and engage that. Okay? So, incident report. Let's look at how logically this is laid out, because our developers did a nice job with this. Here's my basic incident information. Where was it? Who turned me in? What time did it occur? What date did it occur? Okay, who's my offender? A little bit of information about the offender. Here's my first violation, defiance. Well, what did we do about that? We sent the kid to detention. Okay? If this were printed out on separate pieces of paper, this would be my next kid. Here's my offense. Now, this kid had multiple violations, right? Violation 1, the action that goes back to that. Violation 2, the action that goes back to that. Violation 3, the action that goes back to that. And here are my victims. Remember, I had 3 victims. 2 of them were students, and 1 of them was a staff member. I didn't happen to identify that. I could have right here, relation to school. Okay? So, very, very logically organized reports. I like the reports, but, you know, sometimes you don't get everything that you want out of the standard reports. And so I'm going to go back in here now as a district person, because I just want you to see the user-defined end of this. I can go into user-defined reports, and I'm going to pick, because I got this set up in advance. I didn't just wander in here yesterday and say, let's do a webinar. Behavioral pie chart. Okay? Pie chart. Now, I have restricted this report to only look at about 4 different groups of violations. Okay? This is coming out of SchoolLogic, a behavioral pie chart. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. The big one here is disruptive behavior, disrespect. The blue one is simply disrespect. My orange one, and I got dark green. Orange is inappropriate language, and dark green is probably disruptive behavior, okay, or disruptive behavior. So I've got, harassment and built bullying. That's what this one is up here. This is harassment and built bullying, okay. 969 incidents of this. 215 kids were harassed or bullied, okay. This is coming right out of a user-defined report within SchoolLogic. See, I filtered it on these 4 or 5 different offenses. The pivot table, I did the same thing. Okay. Now, another thing that you could be doing is you could run this out as comma-separated values. You could dump all this information to Excel, and you could filter and really slice and dice in Excel and come up with other reports that would keep the people above you in the supply chain at your district happy for like hours. Okay. They stay off your back, and you can get the real work done, because they're looking at the reports you created. Behavioral pivot table. So I did four things here: disrespect, disruptive behavior, harassment, and inappropriate language. Okay? By the way, there were 315 incidents of disrespect. There were 969 incidents of disruptive behavior, and remember, I had 215 bullyings. Okay? Now, of these various behaviors, what did we do about it? Well, of the harassment, 3 of those kids were subjected to some kind of alternate discipline. 18 of them were suspended in school, and 16 of them got out-of-school suspensions. Out of my total out-of-school suspensions of 36. But this 36 number, of course, only represents these 4 categories. Okay? Way cool. A pivot table is simply something laid out horizontally versus something laid out vertically. Okay? That's not exactly a textbook explanation, but it's what it really is. Okay? All reports that we can do right out of SchoolLogic. Okay? Do we have time to check out TeacherLogic, HomeLogic? I got about 5 minutes. Let's go look at those just real quick. I've got that queued up right here. Here's my teacher. I want to be Luke, and I want to enter a password. Now, the cool thing here is that you could actually have your teachers create discipline incidents in TeacherLogic. let's go to discipline. If I come in here and I say add new, a teacher has access to all the things that you saw on the other pages, except here, of course, I'm doing one offender at a time, okay? But still nice, because it takes the burden of entry out of your classroom, out of your office, and gets somebody else to do the work. Now, the teacher can see, look at this, going back to 2009, the teacher can see what have my kids been involved in. This is one of the records that you saw earlier in SchoolLogic. So you can see the teacher gets to see all the stuff in the record. What happened, what did they do about it, all sorts of stuff. Okay? The teacher can also look at the adjudication. Okay? What happened because of it. Now, in SchoolLogic, the parent sees a lot less. And remember, discipline is optional in TeacherLogic. It's also optional here. You don't have to choose to show this to the parent. But if you do, this is what they see. And it's not very much. There was an offense. Here's what the kid was charged with. Here's when we did something about it. In a perfect world, this column would show you what was the action taken by the school district and who handled it. So not a ton of information here, but enough information to let the parent know, hey, something happened. Maybe I should be checking with the school if the school hasn't already checked with me, okay? And the school probably has. So my main thing here today was I wanted you to see the discipline forms. I wanted you to know that behind the scenes there is a ton of stuff to set up. It is an intimidating amount of stuff to set up, but you set it up once. It rolls over from year to year, and if you make the right decisions behind the scenes and then do the discipline form religiously, you will get data that is what you're looking for and lets you drive decisions. You can do, we showed you the reports kind of briefly. Even more briefly than that, we showed you TeacherLogic and SchoolLogic and how they play into this. My main thing is I don't want you guys to end up in the ditch. I want your headwinds to be minimal. I want your trails to be smooth. And if you have friends that didn't attend this today that would like to attend this today, wait till about Monday. Send them to community.schoollogic.com because this recording will be up there, and I will put up there at this address the owner's manual for discipline incidents. Thanks so much for coming out today. I really, really appreciate your time and attention. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you have a great afternoon.